What does it mean if a car dealer has to give their cars away, sell them at a loss, mark them down drastically, even pay some of the salespeople extra money directly from the manufacturer right to the salesperson and skip the dealers specifically? Well, that's what's happening at Nissan, and they're losing their shirts. They're getting so desperate, in fact, that they're literally incentivizing sales of every one of their vehicles. And while, yeah, there's a few of the big hitters like the GTR and the premium version of the Pathfinder, the mass majority of Nissan products are not selling in 2024. Not nearly fast enough. They're over and is starting to exceed 100 days on the car lot and rising. Where the industry average is around 70, Nissan is clearly starting to lose touch with reality and people are not buying their products. Welcome, my savory seeds of sunshine, and today we're going to talk about some of the woes that exist over at Nissan headquarters. And amidst all of this cost of living crisis and people not able to afford to eat, not afford rent, and certainly can't afford the high price of vehicles, it still continues to hover around $47,000 for the average transaction price of a new vehicle. Who's buying these vehicles? Not me, not my buddy, not my wife. None of us can seem to afford the cost of a new vehicle. At least not by today's standards if you want to stay afloat, unless you want to live roadside in the backseat of your car. Most people are now starting to make that decision. You know what? I don't think I need that car. $47,000 transaction price? Pfft. That's way beyond what I can afford. And even to say 20% down, which is clearly the best advice I would offer, even to come up with a 20% deposit on a $50,000 car, which is close to the average transaction price, you need $10,000 liquid. Well, that's $20,000 before tax earnings. That's a lot of money, and that's just to get you in the door. Then you're stuck paying $500, $600, $800, maybe $1,000 or more for those monthly payments. A lot of people are finding that very difficult. And unfortunately, outlier brands like Nissan, which are no longer the top pops anymore, people are finding other options. If you want Japanese vehicles, they're certainly looking at the likes of Toyotas, Hondas, and even Mazda's now up and coming. While the big three from GM, Ford, as well as Ram, Stellantis products and Jeeps are not selling very well either, and their lots are overflowing. So many people get stuck into these predicaments, like in 2022, sadly, where we have a negative equity situation for a lot of people. They bought in way too high, they got way over their heads, the banks were giving them money left, right, and center, and sadly, all you had to do was sign on the dotted line. If you had a heartbeat and a pulse, you were pretty much good to go. And it's a sad state because a lot of those very people now are stuck sitting night after night, day after day, sleepless nights, worrying about where their next $1,000 a month payment is coming from. Sadly, that's where it's going on here. And Nissan recognizes that, and they're trying to bring customers back in the door. And while vehicles like the GTR do have their following, that vehicle's clearly on the way out. There's conversation about a new R36 version of the GTR, but at the end of the day, with the electrification, the increased costs, that feels like it's a very niche space and very few people can afford those. The rest of the Nissan lineup consists of vehicles that just aren't that popular. Rogues with definitely the CVT transmissions have had lots of problems. Gearboxes, transmissions have started to expand on their reputation. And sadly, for the brand, they've recognized that. And customers have too. So on top of the OEM directly at the factory sending out incentives for the salespeople to sell, giving them a paycheck, basically cut $1,000 a unit to specifically sell 23 model years, 24s aren't selling all that hot either. And while they had a very good first quarter, they're starting to recognize the writing on the wall and people are not buying. Interestingly enough to note, 2023, Nissan actually sold 22.2% more vehicles than they did the year before in 2022. Quite interesting. And as well, the first quarter, they sold 8.5% more than they did previously, lagging in 2023. So clearly, sales were on the rise, and then they fell. The problem is Nissan's like every other OEM manufacturer. They just are losing disconnect with reality. There's this isolation between the actual consumer and the manufacturer. Consumer does not have the money. Our backs are broken. A lot of people are having to make a very difficult discussion or decision. Food or car? Well, that's an easy one. So at the end of the day, trying to get these people in there, incentivize them to sell a new or buy a new vehicle is a much, much harder thing to get people to let go of their hard-earned dollars. It's bad enough the governments are squeezing every last tax dollar out of you and sending it overseas. On top of that, we're having problems with inflation rates that just don't seem to be letting up. And as well, that then curtails down to a situation of holding steady on bank interest charges. And during 2020, when all of this crap started hitting the fan, a lot of people were recognizing, hey, the governments are throwing money at us left, right, and center. Mental health is good because I'm sitting at home. The company's paying me to sit at home. Government's throwing money my way. Life is good. Interest rates were low back initially in 2020. So people started going out, buying cars like these great little supercars, toys, quads, motorcycles, things that they didn't necessarily need. But then we hit 2022, we skyrocketed with interest rates. People start to scramble. Governments started to claw back on some of these handouts. And even worse, now governments like Canada started saying, you know, we paid you so much like CERB, we're going to need some of that back. So now this went to a place of poverty where now people having to trade up for their old jalopy like this instead because they can't afford to drive their supercar. They now have to drive their old beater that they had stored for so many years back in the back 40 in the bush. Because now the floor has literally dropped out and buyers don't have the money like they did 2 years ago. So very recently, a memo sent out to all of the Nissan dealers from the factory obtained by Easy Car Buying states that we're willing to chop off at least 10% below MSRP. That's right. For the first time, we're starting to see some of these OEMs and dealers starting to take a hit. You know, traditionally, dealers had a lot of leeway. They get the vehicle in, they have some leeway. Mostly people were paying sticker price or well beyond. There was market adjustment fees slapped on the top and people just sort of paid it. But now what we're getting is people aren't buying. These vehicles aren't moving. And now Nissan corporate is telling the dealers, go ahead, knock 10% below MSRP. Give it right off the baseline. And for certain models that are a little long on the tooth, for example, like the Armada, give them 15% below sticker. All these manufacturers, even though we know they're still making a profit, let's not fool ourselves. MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price, just means that's the industry average. That's the 0 point. But like temperature, you have above zero and you have below zero. The real question is how far below can you go? Well, at least it's inspiring to start them seeing that they're starting to give us big aggressive incentives as a starting point. Now, this is a great starting point. So what I would suggest on a $50,000 car, if you get $10,000 off, that's $5,000 below sticker. That's right. The Monroney sticker tells you all the options. Make sure you get out the door price and then chisel these very dealers on that out the door price and make sure that we're capitalizing on these opportunities of getting 10, 15, maybe 25% off sticker. These are the times to hit and hit hard. Let's face it. We're on the downslide, the industry is feeling the burn, and almost every single manufacturer is going to take a hit here in 2024. So it begs the question, how affordable are these cars really? Check it out right there, tons of incentives. And guess what? Yes, there's some Nissans on that list. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.